Elias Calloway had spent over a decade on Karim, a prison planet far from the familiar stars of humanity's home. Once a skilled engineer and soldier in the United Earth Fleet, he had been captured during a failed mission to sabotage the galactic corporate empire, Oligarch 8. Now, he was nothing more than a number in a system designed to break him and his fellow prisoners. Coram IV was a harsh, forgotten world, its environment a dangerous blend of extreme temperatures, violent storms, and unpredictable seismic activity. No one had set foot on the planet in centuries. It was located in a remote sector, so far out on the fringes of known space that even the most advanced ships had trouble navigating to it. The planet's gravity was slightly stronger than Earth's, and its atmosphere was a volatile mix of gases that made it almost impossible for anyone to breathe without special suits. It was the perfect place to lock away prisoners that needed to be forgotten. The prison complex itself was a towering structure built into the side of jagged cliffs. From the outside, it looked like an abandoned fortress, abandoned but alive with the hum of alien technology. The guards, strange beings from different parts of the galaxy, patrolled its metal corridors, each one more intimidating than the last. Their faces were hidden behind dark visors, and their voices echoed in a language Elias couldn't even begin to understand. The food was barely enough to keep him alive, and the isolation was crushing. Still, Elias had learned to adapt. Over the years, he had become a shadow of the man he once was, but not completely broken. Elias spent his days learning. He studied the alien architecture of the prison, quietly observing the routines of the guards. He made mental maps of the complex, always searching for a way out. Though his mind had grown weary, his will was still sharp, his determination unwavering. He knew the key to his survival lay in learning everything he could about his prison. Then, one day, Elias made a discovery. It wasn't much a small, strange device hidden deep within the bowels of the prison, but it was enough to change everything. He had been sneaking through an abandoned section of the complex when he found it half buried in a pile of discarded materials, partially camouflaged by the shifting rock of the unstable cliff face. It looked like nothing more than a fragment of alien technology, at first smooth, dark metal with no obvious markings. But when Elias picked it up, he felt a strange pulse vibrate through his fingers, like the device was alive. His heart raced. He'd seen alien technology before he had studied it, worked with it, but this was different. This wasn't like anything the Oligarch 8 Empire had produced, nor was it anything his captors had shown him. There was something far older about it, something ancient, something buried in the forgotten corners of the galaxy. Elias carefully examined the device, his fingers tracing the lines etched into its surface. It was oddly shaped, like a fragment of a larger machine. There were no instructions, no buttons, no obvious way to activate it. Yet it pulsed with a strange energy, as if it were waiting for something, or someone, to unlock it.in. The days that followed, Elias became obsessed with the device. He hid it in his quarters, tucked away from the prying eyes of the guards. When he wasn't working, he would sit with the artifact, trying to decipher its structure, its function. The more he worked, the more he realized that this wasn't just a tool, it was something much more powerful. With every touch, he felt a growing sense of connection to it, as though it recognized him, as though it knew his purpose. But its secrets were buried deep, locked behind an encryption so complex, so intricate that it seemed impossible to crack. Despite the risk, Elias continued to work. Over time, he began to unlock fragments of the device's encrypted message. It started small, strange symbols and phrases that didn't make sense. But as the days turned into weeks, more pieces began to fall into place. What was once a jumbled mess of alien language began to form coherent thoughts. The message was a plea. Not just a plea for help, but a warning. The transmission spoke of an ancient race, long since extinct, and a force that had wiped them out, an entity that consumed entire civilizations, brought entire galaxies to their knees. The message wasn't just about the race that had sent it, but about something far more dire. The universe, the message said, was nearing its breaking point. The balance of all life was in danger. The most shocking revelation came at the end of the message. Humanity. The alien race, the one that had created this device, had been aware of humanity for centuries. They had watched Earth rise from its primitive roots, studied human development, and learned about the species that would come to be known as Death Worlders. It wasn't just a name. Humanity's tenacity, its drive to survive against overwhelming odds, was the reason the ancient race had chosen to make this transmission. The entity they faced, whatever it was, had been unstoppable by all those who tried to stop it before. But the message said, humanity might be different. The final lines of the transmission were clear, almost desperate. Your species is the key to preventing the collapse of the universe. You will either lead to salvation or to ruin. Elias sat back, stunned. His mind raced. The device was a tool, but it was more than that. It was a message from the past, a beacon of hope or a harbinger of destruction. He had always thought of his escape as a personal goal, a way to reclaim his life. But now, with this new knowledge, everything had changed. His escape was no longer just about him. It was about the fate of the galaxy and perhaps all of existence. Elias realized that this was no longer just about survival. This was about destiny. And it was calling him. Elias Calloway's plan to escape the prison planet of Kurim IV had gone better than he could have ever hoped, at least at first. The device he had uncovered had unlocked more than just an alien message. It had given him the means to break free. With the knowledge of the prison systems and the power of the strange artifact, Elias slipped past the guards and navigated the maze of alien corridors, each step pushing him further from his past. He had no clear destination in mind, just the raw, desperate need to escape. Once free of Kurim, IV's orbit, Elias activated a stolen ship that was hidden within the planet's satellite belt. The ship, a rusted relic from an age-long past, barely responded to his commands. Yet, in a twist of luck, it managed to push through the unstable space around Kurim IV, jumping into the unknown sectors. He had no destination, only a vague sense that he was running out of time. He knew the message from the artifact had called humanity the key to something greater, but he didn't know what or why. What he didn't expect was the chaos he encountered outside the prison planet. The galaxy was not what it had been when he had been imprisoned all those years ago. The once stable systems were in turmoil. Systems that had long been ruled by the Oligarch 8 Empire now seemed to be unraveling at the seams. War was spreading like wildfire. Ships from all corners of the galaxy clashed in the void, and planets once governed by the Empire were now fractured into pieces. Governments that had once stood tall were falling apart, while new factions fought to gain control of whatever power remained. Aboard his battered ship, Elias had no choice but to drift deeper into the chaos. That's when he found them, the rebels. The first encounter was less than peaceful. His ship had been hailed by a rebel group while drifting in a sector on the edge of the Empire's reach. Their ships, agile and unmarked, were far from friendly, immediately taking aim at his vessel. Elias, unable to outrun them, was quickly boarded. A firefight broke out on his ship, and for a moment he thought he was done for. But then, to his surprise, he was not killed on sight. Instead, he was taken prisoner once again, though this time it was by a group of rebels, a ragtag faction that had been fighting the Empire for decades. They didn't know what to make of him at first. To them, Elias was just another Imperial spy or mercenary, someone sent by the Empire to infiltrate their ranks. But Elias was no spy. His story, and the technology he had discovered, was far more complicated. As they interrogated him, Elias explained his past, the failed sabotage mission, the prison planet, and the alien artifact that had allowed him to escape. At first, they were skeptical, especially Jarex, the charismatic leader of the rebel faction. Jarex was a calculating man, driven by an unrelenting need to bring down the Empire. But when Elias shared what he had learned about the alien technology and its potential to manipulate time and space, something shifted in Jarex's demeanor. The artifact was the kind of weapon he could only dream of, a tool that could change the course of the war, something the rebellion needed desperately. "Humanity is more than just a key," Elias said one night, as they sat in a dark, cluttered command room aboard the rebel ship. "I think we're meant to stop something worse than the Empire." Jarex's eyes glinted with interest. He didn't say it aloud, but Elias could see the temptation in his eyes. To the rebels, Elias wasn't just a prisoner anymore. He was a symbol. the symbol of humanity's resilience, its ability to survive against the odds, and now he could be their tool in this galactic chess game. Yet, as Elias spent more time among the rebels, he began to notice cracks in the idealistic picture they had painted. Despite their noble talk of overthrowing the Empire, there was something darker beneath the surface. Jarek's faction had their own agenda, one that made Elias uncomfortable. The rebels, under Jarek's leadership, had already begun using the very same alien technology Elias had discovered. They manipulated time and space in small but effective ways to disrupt the Empire's war efforts. They shifted battles, creating confusion and disarray in the Empire's forces. But this came with a cost. The technology wasn't a perfect weapon, it was unpredictable. Each use caused unexpected consequences, altering timelines and realities in ways that were hard to foresee. Innocent lives were lost. Entire planets were devastated by ripple effects of time manipulation. Elias began to question his place in this rebellion. He had come to believe that humanity was meant to restore balance, to be the force that could change the galaxy for the better. But the rebels' methods? They were no better than the Empire they fought against. Jarek had no hesitation in using the technology for strategic advantage, regardless of the moral cost. The same Empire that killed innocents to maintain its power was mirrored in the rebellion's willingness to sacrifice people for their cause. One night, Elias shared his concerns with Tessa, Jarek's second-in-command. Tessa was a brilliant tactician, young and idealistic, with a fire in her eyes that matched Elias's own. She believed in the cause, in the possibility that humanity could guide the galaxy out of its chaos. But Elias had come to suspect that Tessa was starting to see the same darkness in the rebellion that he had. "Do you really believe that humanity is the key to saving all this?" Elias asked her one evening as they watched a battle unfold from the ship's viewing deck. "I have to believe it," she said softly, looking out at the distant lights of dying planets. "Humanity's potential for good. It's the only hope we've got. Without it, what's left?" But Elias had his doubts. The universe wasn't just tearing itself apart because of the Empire. It was tearing itself apart because every faction, every side was willing to make the same moral compromises, even if they cloaked it in the guise of righteousness. Tessa's belief in humanity's purity gave Elias hope, but as he dug deeper into the rebels' use of the alien technology, he began to realize the terrifying truth: humanity wasn't just being tested by an outside force. Humanity's greatest enemy might just be humanity itself. The deeper Elias went into the rebellion's network, the more he uncovered about the true extent of their operations. The rebels were no longer just fighting a war, they were manipulating the very fabric of reality. And as he learned more, Elias came to understand that his original mission to sabotage the Empire wasn't just a mission to protect humanity. It had been part of a larger game, one that humanity itself had unknowingly set into motion, a game with stakes that could cost the galaxy everything. Now Elias had to ask himself, was he willing to risk everything for a rebellion that might be just as dangerous as the Empire they sought to overthrow? He had believed it was simply a tool, an ancient relic of a forgotten civilization, a means of escape, and, perhaps, a weapon. But everything changed the moment it began to speak to him directly. At first, it was subtle. A pulse of energy, a flicker at the edge of his consciousness. Elias had thought it was just a malfunction of the artifact systems, a lingering signal from an ancient race. However, over the course of several days, the artifact began to communicate in full sentences, whispering in a language that Elias instinctively understood. Its voice was not mechanical. It was alive, conscious, aware. "Elias Calloway," it said, its tone deep and resonant. "You are the threshold. Humanity is the key. But the key is not what you think." The words echoed in his mind, sending a cold shiver down his spine. It wasn't just a message, it was a presence, a consciousness. It was an entity, not bound by time, but by thought itself. The realization was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. In a moment of sheer revelation, the artifact flooded Elias's mind with visions. He saw the galaxy in flames, empires collapsing, worlds consumed by chaos. But there was something more, a shadow, lurking behind the chaos, a force that manipulated events from the shadows, unseen and powerful. He saw the Empire, the rebels, the hidden factions, all pawns in a much larger game. The artifact showed Elias a truth far more staggering than he had ever imagined. The galaxy had been in a state of stasis for centuries. The ancient powers that controlled it, powers that included the Oligarch 8 Empire, the rebel factions, and other mysterious forces, had unknowingly maintained this stagnation. Every move, every conflict, every war had been carefully orchestrated by these powers to keep the galaxy in a perpetual state of imbalance. They had all been blind to the true stakes. The artifact revealed that humanity was not just another race vying for power in this game. No, humanity was the variable and unpredictable force with the potential to either shatter the current order or break free from it altogether. But the path humanity took was not set. There was a future where humanity, with its instincts of violence and conquest, would plunge the galaxy into a cataclysmic war. And there was another future, a future where humanity could evolve, transcend its baser instincts, and rise above its flaws to bring balance to the galaxy. But that path was not guaranteed. It depended on something humanity had yet to achieve: wisdom. The artifact made it clear that the galaxy was on the verge of a cataclysmic event, something far worse than anything Elias had experienced. Humanity's role was central to whether the universe would be doomed or transformed. The artifact's voice now sounded more insistent, more urgent. You must decide, Elias. You are the catalyst. Will humanity continue its cycle of violence, or will you break free of the patterns that bind you? You are not the savior they believe you to be. Your purpose is far greater. Elias stood frozen, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had been living for one goal: escape. The universe had been so focused on its own conflicts, so driven by its need for power and control, that it had forgotten how to truly live. And now, the burden had fallen on humanity to decide which path they would take. In that moment, Elias knew his personal struggle to escape Quorum IV was not the true challenge. It had been the first step, a test of his ability to break free. Now, the real trial had begun. He had to decide whether to use the artifact's power to fight the Empire and the Rebellion, to use it as a weapon to crush the powers that had enslaved the galaxy, or whether he would walk a different path, one that rejected violence and sought a more enlightened future. The choice seemed impossible. On one hand, Elias had seen the rebels' desperate struggle. Their cause was just, or so it seemed. Jarex, Tessa, and the others believed that by overthrowing the Empire, they could bring freedom to the galaxy. But Elias had learned the hard way that their methods, using the very same alien technology to manipulate time and space, were just as destructive as the Empire's own. The Rebellion, like the Empire, was willing to sacrifice anything, anyone, to achieve its goals. He thought of Tessa, the idealistic tactician who had shown him kindness, who had believed in humanity's potential to do good. Her dream of a peaceful galaxy had felt real, tangible, something he could stand behind. But would her dream survive the reality of war? Elias had his doubts. The artifact had made one thing clear: humanity's future was in flux. If Elias joined the rebellion and used the artifact's power to fight back against the Empire, he might win, but what kind of victory would it be? Would humanity simply replace one set of tyrants with another? The galaxy had been stuck in a cycle of violence for centuries. Elias didn't know if humanity was ready to break free. The other option, the one the artifact urged him toward, was even more daunting: to reject both the Empire and the Rebellion. To find a third path, one that didn't involve violence or conquest, but rather understanding, growth, and transcendence. It meant asking humanity to evolve beyond its instincts. It meant breaking free from the destructive cycles of greed and power. It was the path of wisdom, but it was uncertain. It required something no one had ever done before: to abandon the very things that made them human. Elias was torn. He had always been a soldier, a fighter. He had been trained to resist, to fight, to survive. But now, the galaxy was asking him to do something that seemed impossible. Could humanity truly evolve beyond its flaws? Was it possible for a species so entrenched in violence to embrace peace? The weight of the artifact's message pressed on him. It wasn't just about him anymore. His decision would shape the future of the galaxy. Would humanity rise to greatness or fall into oblivion? It was a question that echoed in his mind, one that would haunt him until he made his choice. For the first time, Elias felt the true burden of responsibility. The galaxy was not just a battlefield, it was a test, and humanity's future depended on whether it could learn to rise above its flaws, or if it would continue down the path of destruction. Elias knew one thing for certain: the galaxy's fate was in his hands now. Elias Calloway had spent years in confinement, both physical and mental. Now, after escaping the prison planet Kurim IV, he had learned the deepest secrets of the galaxy and uncovered the incredible powers of the alien artifact. His entire life had been marked by one struggle after another, whether fighting to escape imprisonment or grappling with the revelation that humanity could either save or destroy the galaxy. But in that moment, standing before the artifact, Elias realized that his struggle was no longer about personal survival or even about helping the rebels or fighting the Empire. His mission had grown into something far more complex, and the time for war was over. Elias chose a path no one had expected. Rather than using the artifact's powers to fight the Empire or to support the rebel factions, he chose to broadcast the message that had been ingrained in the artifact's core. He would challenge the galaxy not with weapons, but with truth. His decision was not without hesitation. The rebel forces, desperate for victory, would see his action as betrayal. The Empire, ever controlling, would see it as a threat to their absolute rule. Yet deep within him, Elias knew that this was humanity's greatest test, to rise above the primal instincts of survival and conflict, to show that they could choose peace and enlightenment instead of war and destruction. Elias activated the artifact, the vast network of energy pulses from. The device reverberated through space, linking every mind that could receive it. In an instant, the galaxy was flooded with a singular shared experience, an overwhelming torrent of thought, vision, and emotion. All sentient species, from the smallest alien colonies to the most advanced empires, could hear the challenge. It was a call to transcend the violent past and evolve into something better. Every mind in the galaxy, from soldiers to scholars, from leaders to criminals, was forced to confront one irrefutable truth. The future of the galaxy rested in their hands, and humanity's potential would either inspire or doom them all. Elias's final words echoed in the collective consciousness of the universe. Rise above. Evolve. You are the architects of your own fate. The broadcast spread like wildfire across the galaxy, sparking immediate, unexpected responses. At first, Elias believed that his message would ignite a movement of peace and unity. But reality was far more complex than he had anticipated. Some factions, the idealists, the peaceful races, and even some members of the rebellion saw the broadcast as a call to unite. They began to build alliances, discussing the possibility of reshaping the galaxy into something new, something better. These factions, too, felt the weight of the challenge and began seeking ways to elevate themselves, casting aside their violent pasts in favor of a collective vision of progress. However, many others reacted far more violently. The Empire, threatened by the idea of a new order, saw the broadcast as an existential threat. The warlords, corrupt officials, and power-hungry factions all took it as a declaration of war, an attempt to disrupt the established order. They retaliated fiercely, sending fleets to subjugate or eliminate any that dared to embrace the idea of peace. In an instant, new wars erupted, fueled by the very message Elias had hoped would unite them. But the true twist did not come from the violence. It came from the minds of those who received the broadcast. The artifact's power was far greater than Elias had realized. It did not simply broadcast a message, it began to alter the very consciousness of those who listened. Some minds, unable to process the flood of new information, began to crumble. They were overwhelmed by the sheer weight of the challenge, and their sanity shattered. Desperation and chaos took root in their hearts, and entire populations descended into madness. Others, however, underwent a transformation. They had been given the opportunity to rise above their limitations, to evolve into beings of higher thought. These newly awakened minds were no longer bound by the same instincts that drove their species in the past. They could see the galaxy with clarity, understanding that their power lay not in domination or destruction, but in unity and enlightenment. These beings began to form a new type of alliance, one built on mutual respect and understanding, focused on knowledge and the shared pursuit of progress. Elias had hoped that his message would be the key to a peaceful transformation, but what he witnessed was far more complex than he had expected. There was no clear victory, no sudden shift to peace. Instead, the galaxy had been divided in a way he could not have predicted. Some minds were liberated, while others were destroyed. Chaos spread through the regions that had previously been united, but in those cracks, there were glimpses of something greater emerging, something beyond human comprehension, something far beyond the old cycle of violence. Now Elias found himself trapped by the consequences of his own decision. Though he had intended to free the galaxy, he had only triggered the beginning of a new phase of evolution, one that was messy, unpredictable, and dangerous. The rebellion, which had once seen him as their symbol, now viewed him with suspicion. The Empire, which had hunted him for years, saw him as an even greater threat, now that he had caused such a widespread shift. He was no longer a prisoner of the Empire. He was a prisoner of his own choices, isolated from both sides, cut off from the very world he had hoped to save. Elias sat alone in a quiet, empty room. He had started this journey seeking revenge, then escape, and finally, redemption. But now, he realized that he had sacrificed himself for something larger than his own survival. The universe was no longer the same, and humanity's future was uncertain. It was no longer just about survival or conquest. It was about evolution, both intellectual and moral. Humanity had the potential to rise above its flaws, but it had also shown how easily it could fall back into chaos. The galaxy had changed, but so had Elias. He no longer saw himself as a hero, nor as a victim. He was simply a catalyst one who had triggered a new age. Whether that age would be one of enlightenment or destruction remained to be seen. The future was no longer in his hands. As Elias looked out at the stars, he couldn't help but wonder if humanity was truly ready for the power it now wielded. The path to enlightenment had always been shrouded in uncertainty. The question now lingered: had he opened the door to something new and beautiful, or had he unleashed a force too powerful to control? The answer, Elias knew, would only reveal itself with time.